Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel and your Rubber City radio stations. I'm Stephanie York, your host today. Thank you for joining us on our global outlook with a local view. Throughout its history, the Akron Jewish community has made many choices regarding its religious and communal lifestyles. Through it all, religion has retained its role as a central identifying principle of the community. With a population of just under 2,000, Akron has maintained 3 thriving synagogues: Temple Israel, Revere Road Synagogue, also called Ancient Shvard, and Beth El Synagogue. And when a big change happens in the Jewish community, it's big news. Beth El, Akron's conservative synagogue, has been without a cantor for a couple years. With the recent retirement of its rabbi this summer, Beth El had the opportunity to bring in all new clergy, both a rabbi and a cantor, something that rarely happens at the same time. I'm excited today to be joined by Akron's newest clergy of Beth El Synagogue, Rabbi Elyssa Austerklein and Cantor Matthew Austerklein. And if you are confused by the same last names, don't be. This rabbi-cantor super duo are married. Today we are going to find out how hard or easy it is to work with your spouse in leading a congregation of over 300 families, to then go home and work together to raise a young son, all while worshiping and learning together as spiritual beings. Is this a dream come true, to work, live, play, and worship with your spouse? Well, we're going to find out. Thank you, Rabbi Elyssa and Cantor Matt, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
You're
We love
welcome.
your introduction.
Yes. Well, now, before we get started, I would like to explain some terms that we will be using throughout the broadcast. Cantor Matt, you go by Hazan Matt. Can you explain what Hazan means for our audience?
So in general, a cantor is like a Jewish music minister, or you could think of it as a rabbi with more of a musical portfolio of activity in the community. So the word chazan is the ancient Hebrew word for this communal role. In the same way that in some languages there are words that are sort of untranslatable. I'm a German art song singer as well, so Sehnsucht, like the desire to see somebody, you can only somewhat translate from German into English. I'm sure there are many other terms. But chazan for me is the Hebrew term and has a lot of historical weight to it. You can read ancient tomes, or ancient being like 1,800 years old, about the meaning of the profession of chazan and what the cantor would lead in the prayers and what he would do in the community. And so I prefer to go by that title just because it has just a deeper resonance for me as a calling, as a personal calling.
Very nice. And then briefly, can either one of you explain the difference between a Reformed synagogue, a conservative synagogue, and an Orthodox synagogue, or a Jewish way of growing up?
Yeah, I think that it's mostly about the religious observance in the home and in the synagogue. So an Orthodox person is the most religiously observant, particularly with relationship to the Sabbath and the rules of eating, the kashrut dietary laws. And then someone who is Reform is going to be the most liberal, the most progressive in those laws and in their relationship to the secular community. And conservative Judaism really tries to meet somewhere in the middle, totally understanding all of the traditional laws, being interested in halakha, which is Jewish legal ideas, and wanting to also have a firm stance in the secular world. So it's meeting in the middle.
And I'll add that these are also, all 3 movements also are kind of their own cultures. The Reform movement started in Germany and was very into being reasonable and rational and having religion look like the religion of their surroundings. And so Reform really is its own culture, even today has its own song leading culture, its own music. Orthodox Judaism also its own culture and has kept its own very ties to things like the Yiddish language and Ashkenazi, that is to say Jewish German ways of speaking the Hebrew language and other cultural ways. And the conservative movement is really, you should think about it as an American movement, because it was really the movement of so many of the Eastern European immigrants that came to this country from 1880 through 1920 and their descendants. And it's really a movement that's put a lot of focus on peoplehood, really, almost before anything else. So you'll find a lot more flexibility about Jewish law and even Jewish identity in the conservative movement for the sake of keeping the traditions and the folkways and the family of the people together.
Wonderful. So can you both now, I'll let whoever wants to start, tell us a little bit about yourself, what it takes education-wise to become a rabbi or a cantor, and where you studied and to learn this.
Sure. So I'm originally from Cleveland, from Shaker Heights, Ohio, and have lived in many other places. I spent 12 years of schooling in the Boston area. So that was undergraduate, graduate school with a master's in theology, and then rabbinical school, which was 6 years long. And it's usually 5 or 6 years, depending upon what your Hebrew level is. And that's after you have finished an undergraduate, and some people do a graduate degree, other people don't. For some people, it's a second profession after they've been out in the world doing other things. Other people know, like I did, that I wanted to be a rabbi from the time that I was a young person. Probably from when I had my bat mitzvah, I started thinking seriously that I wanted to be a clergy person. So it's something that I've wanted to pursue for a long time. But the seminary that I went to in particular, Hebrew College, is pluralistic. It's non-denominational. So when you ask your question about the different denominations, there's also the reality of Jewish life in the United States, which is that sometimes people choose a synagogue by proximity or by what feels comfortable more than because they really feel strongly to be part of a particular denomination. And I think that we see that more and more in modern Judaism. So the school that I went to was very traditional in that we studied in the Beit Midrash, which is the study hall. We did a lot of our learning in what's called chavruta, which means in a pair, face to face, because it's very different to study something or read something on your own than when you do it face to face with somebody else. So traditional Jewish learning is always out loud with somebody else. So that was the basis of our program, but it was also the idea that each one of us goes on our own spiritual journey. That there wasn't going to be a dictation from the faculty and staff that we had to practice this way or that way. We just had to have a very serious engagement with what it means to be a Jewish person.
Interesting. And how about you, Cantor, Rabbi? Cantor.
Chazan. So I was born in Alexandria, Virginia, and spent most of my life, other than 1 year in Michigan, living in Virginia. I went to William and Mary for my undergraduate degree, and then to the Jewish Theological Seminary, which is the conservative movement's East Coast institution, to the H.L. Miller Cantorial School to become a cantor. The cantorate is such an interesting profession. I think a lot about it. It is a profession that used to be learned by apprenticeship. It is really the mastery of a chant art, of a art of leading prayer, of improvising vocally, learning how to chant from the Torah, from the scriptures, and a variety of ritual skills that really have defined being a cantor. But also, really, the cantor, his or her fundamental role is to be what's called the shaliach tzibur, and that's Hebrew for being the messenger of the community. So that means that you're really there to embody what it means to be a Jewish person, and to model that as a praying person and as a spiritual singer to the community. Now, in a modern context, being a cantor has become, I like to say cantor is as cantor does, because in the modern world, there's so many more things that all clergy people have to do, whether it's being involved as education directors in religious schools, or being involved as administrators, or being involved in community programming, or being chaplains. So for me, when I trained to be a cantor, I really wanted to have as much breadth as I could. So I worked 2 summers as a chaplain, one with people with mental illness, and one as a hospital chaplain. I've worked at Jewish summer camps. I've worked in educational settings. Really, for me, the cantor has to sort of be a utility player in the field, but with a real focus in the essence of spirituality as it comes through music.
Very nice. So why Akron? What led you to Akron?
Well, I think that when we met, we were both in the pulpit already. So I was in Florida and he was in Maryland. And we both really love being in the pulpit. But I left Florida and I moved to Maryland to be with him, and we got married. And we knew that at some point we were going to want to enter a pulpit together, because the reason that both of us became clergy people is our real love of God and wanting to express that and share that with other people. And the ability to do that in a synagogue community means that you're there with people through the entire life cycle. And that's something that's really meaningful to both of us, as well as a focus on leading prayers is something that we both really love to do. So we knew that to be able to do those things, there are clergy couples who do it in two different synagogues or two different churches. If they're Christian ministers, they do that. But we really wanted to be able to be in the same place because we wanted to have a family life with our synagogue community. So eventually we knew that it would happen, that we would be together. And so it looked like it was the right time, particularly when we saw that the rabbi was retiring in Beth El. And I love Ohio. I haven't been to Ohio since, for about half of my life. I was out of Ohio, but I really love the Midwest, and I really was happy to come back. When we learned more about Beth El and what we see as a visionary move to be able to let go of an old building and sell an old building that really doesn't meet the needs of the community anymore, both because of its size and its expense, but because wanting to be closer to the center of the Jewish community at the JCC, we respected that a lot, and we felt like it was going to be the right community for us that had that initiative and that vision to see that they were able to successfully make a big move. Because we have some different ideas about things, and we really want to get at people's hearts and minds, and we felt that a community that was able to make that kind of move would be able to go with us on the journey that we want to take people on.
So I'd like to remind our viewers now, and those who have joined late, that we are here with Rabbi Elyssa Austerklein and her husband, Hazan Matt Austerklein, the new clergy at Beth El Synagogue, a conservative synagogue in Akron, Ohio. So let's go back to, we just completed the high holidays. Jews around the world just completed the high holidays. Can you explain briefly what high holidays we just observed and how your first high holiday experience went in the new synagogue?
So the Jewish high holidays are a period of leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. These are like the real spiritually sort of the deep wells of the Jewish year, in which we come before God and we are judged, and we're also forgiven and reminded that we are loved, and in which we commit to improving our actions and review our actions of the year and make apology where we've done wrong. So that great sort of spiritual moment. It starts actually about 7 weeks before in the summer, where we start leading up to the big season itself. And it's a big moment for many Jews. It's probably one of the most observed holidays by all Jews anywhere. Passover, I think, is number one. Passover is number one, interestingly, because there's a big meal
Even
involved.
though that's not necessarily observed in the synagogue,
food, though, right?
It's observed in the home. I would say probably the high holy days are the most observed in the synagogue, but most observed Jewish holiday would be Passover.
So fasting isn't as popular as eating a big meal at Passover.
Yes, that's true. And there is
Exactly.
fasting on Yom Kippur, and there's sort of recognition of sin and some heavy stuff.
Which unfortunately, if Jews, which there are a lot of Jews who come only for the high holy days, and so they only get to see that taste of sin, right?
Sin doesn't taste as good as brisket.
Right, of recalling our sins and trying to wipe clean the slate, which of course is something that's important in the course of one's life, but it's not the regular week or the regular experience of what Judaism and Jewish prayer is about. So we encourage people to be able to see more than just what happens over the high holy days to get the full experience.
Although I'll say for me, and we had a very special high holidays. On a personal level, this is actually the first high holidays I've actually spent with my spouse. In our previous job arrangement, I was a cantor at a large synagogue in Maryland, and Rabbi Elyssa was running this wonderful communal high holidays in Sarasota, in Florida, and I was alone for the holidays. And so it was just really special to actually have the holidays with my family. Very special. And this whole year, I mean, it's been such a wonderful, just the energy of joy. We have a band for our service, like a drum and a piano and a guitar, and a lot of just communal singing and moments of reflection, and And I just felt it was just a very special one for me, and really the response in the community has been really fantastic.
So let's talk about the fact that you two are indeed married and have a young son. Have you worked together long-term before? Or it sounds like this is your first time, maybe? And was this a pro or con when you made your decision to move to Akron?
So this is our first time working together, although of course before we were officially working together, we were always talking about Judaism and issues in Judaism and how to lead communities. So that's not something that's new. Just actually being in the same place and having the same community is new, and it's certainly a pro. I mean, it's exactly what we had envisioned for ourselves eventually, and it's so far so good.
Yeah.
I would say it's really wonderful because we're able to, because we know each other so intimately, we're able to support each other's strengths and also help each other and be sensitive to each other's challenges and push on those too, where we can grow. So there's an immense amount of potential for growth and possibility when we're working with each other in knowing each other so intimately, whereas when you work with somebody who you don't know on this level, then sometimes you push things under the rug, or you're not as sensitive because you want to maintain the decorum of a work environment. Whereas, of course, we have decorum in our marriage too, but it's a little bit different, right? We're able to really discuss anything that comes up and work through it, and it's wonderful to be able to do it together.
And I think we feel really much stronger for it. You know, both of us are really united by our commitment to spirituality, and that we have like a united front in really putting that, you know, forward into the community, and we're both able to teach it in intersecting and diverse ways. It's just really, I think we feel more ourselves as clergy people and as faith leaders. It's a really cool thing. And I'll add that it's also, we're actually not doing 2 full-time jobs. We're actually job sharing effectively. About a job, 1.3 jobs, I think it is. We're effectively both 2/3 time.
As much as you can say that for clergy.
As much as you can say that when you're always, for all on-call professionals. Yeah.
Exactly.
But it really allows us to, you know, to cover for each other. You know, Rabbi Elyssa is a very musical rabbi who was a backup singer for Shania Twain once. I love to share this fact. And you know, I'm
At
Blossom. I was only a backup singer for Big Bird, so that's which is also a true
Equally
story.
entertaining.
Equally entertaining. But you know, and I'm a cantor with a lot of broad, you know, clergy interests, and we can really fully both be engaged and cover for each other. So there are services we're both at. There will be a few services that only I will be at, or only the rabbi will be at, and we're able to cover for each other and spend more time really with our family, which is nice too.
So really, I want to know how the dynamics will be on a Saturday morning after a big marital spat the night before. Are you going to be able to disengage and leave it all at the door? Or are we going to feel that tension, or do I just have to show up and find out?
Well, I will say that when I think we were already engaged, although we might have been courting and not quite engaged yet. I don't remember exactly. But we started asking elderly couples who were married, you know, what was most important in their relationships, or you know, how they succeeded to be married for so long, since not everybody has that opportunity and that benefit to have such a long-term marriage. So we did that a lot, actually. We asked a lot of people, and one of the things that came up several times was never go to bed angry, right? So I think that we've stuck to that, and you know, we make sure that anything that has come up during the day, we work it out before we go to sleep at night, and we make sure that once we close our eyes, peace has been reached.
Well, you had your chance to get me there every Saturday morning just to find out what would happen, but now I know, so.
That's right.
So you might not see me as much. Hazan Matt, I read that you co-founded, I think it's called Elyssa Austerklein. Finu. Can you tell me what that is?
So when I was a congregational cantor in Maryland, we had a teen Jewish a cappella group, and they ran themselves. It was the coolest thing, just watching a bunch of high schoolers make amazing, upbeat Jewish music, building their identities, adding to our service. And I got to thinking, there's really not a lot of repertoire for them to sing in the synagogue. There's a big history of Jewish choral music, but the idea of doing Jewish music in a contemporary a cappella style as part of prayer had very, very rarely been done. So I actually, inspired by this group, it's called Marak Hayom, you can go on YouTube, MARAKHAYOM, 2 words.
Great.
No, they're really good. I'm very proud of them. So I founded with a colleague in Chicago this competition called Ilufinu, where we offered, it was a contest for college Jewish a cappella groups, of which there are, I think, 42 nationwide. In fact, we have the OSU one, the Meshuggah coming to Akron in January, January 26th and 27th. But to get them to write music for worship, for spiritual music. And the results are in. I love the music that we've gotten, and we actually have a finalist concert coming up in Chicago on January 20th. You can find out more at www.ilufinu.org. But it's really, for me, music is such a fundamental part of spirituality for anybody. And so finding a place where these kids' love of singing, their love of singing, intersects with their Jewish identity, and that their spirituality can be a part of both of those, is just it's an easy win for God. It's an easy win for the Jewish community. So I was like, let's do this. So I'm really excited for what will eventually become a book, the first ever book of Jewish liturgical a cappella music published by the Cantor's Assembly, which is actually also based here in Akron.
Fabulous.
It's very, very cool. I'm totally nerdy about it, if you can't tell.
Well, that's exciting. That's very exciting for Akron and everybody. So I'm going to turn the discussion to more general questions about the state of conservative Judaism today and Judaism in general in America. Is it true that more Jews are raising their kids Reform? And are there any numbers on that you know, or are they just not formally raising their kids in synagogues?
So to my knowledge, across the board, affiliation with any faith organization has been going down a lot in America, period. Over the years, we've seen that each movement has sort of had its boom years. The conservative movement's boom years were really the 50s to the 70s, when the children of the Orthodox, who didn't want to remain Orthodox, decided to be Jewish in a way that was more comfortable to them. And then as the next generation, we're really in the period of the Reform boom. This is my feeling on it, where sort of a lot of conservative Jews, or children of conservative Jews, have become Reform Jews. And there's actually, interestingly, a lot more Hebrew liturgy that's come back into the Reform movement in the last 20, 30 years, I think in part as a result. But I think that all movements everywhere are really being forced to look back at what their basic principles are and how they're going to offer a profound message for our times. Because just being Jewish just because, or just joining a synagogue just because you're Jewish and that's what you do, is not an assumption people really have anymore.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Pew Report had expressed that more and more people, Jews and non-Jews, call themselves spiritual but not religious. Mm-hmm. So, I think that speaks to the need for synagogues to appeal to the Spirit, and to do so more. It's also true that among Jewish people, there's more and more intermarriage, so marrying people who aren't Jewish. And the Reform movement accepts that the most out of the three movements. So it makes sense that people who are getting married to non-Jews more naturally find themselves in a Reform community than in a conservative community, even though conservative Judaism has made an effort to reach their hand out to those families. Up until now, conservative clergy people are not permitted to actually marry those people. So there is a limit to how far the hand can be extended.
So, because I know you wanted to get to this part, I'm going to end a little bit on a lighter note and do a little what I call speed round. And you can both answer these questions. We'll go one to the other and see how it goes. So what book are you currently reading?
Well, I just read A High Holy Day Companion, actually put out by my rabbinical school.
All right. And you?
I have a deal with one of the kids in our community that we're both going to read one book I picked and one book he picked. So we're in the middle of The Chosen, which I picked, and he wants me to read Aragon. I haven't gotten to that yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. So if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I'm feeling like a brisket right now, so brisket, but that probably wouldn't be very healthy.
Pizza.
That's always a good one. Are you a morning person?
Yes.
No.
I know who's covering morning services. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Okay. And favorite Jewish holiday?
Ooh, Purim.
Sukkot, which
Sukkot.
starts on Wednesday.
Yay! So it's coming up. And favorite pop song?
Oh gosh.
I don't know if I have one.
I don't know. Most of the things I've been singing to my son to sleep are like German and Italian art songs from hundreds of years ago.
And I sing a lot
but
of
here we are.
religious Hebrew.
No, I'll give you a pop song. Pompeii. I actually even forget who the actual singer is, but it really is a good song for reflecting on the high holidays. So
Okay.
But Tizmoret is the Jewish a cappella group that sings it really well. So.
Thank you. I'm Stephanie York. Thank you for joining us today on Forum 360 for a global outlook with a local view.
Forum 360 is brought to you with support from Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, Rubber City Radio Group, Acronist.com, Hudson Cable, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Forum 360 supporters, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.